Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump floating rebate checks for Americans as tariff revenue pours in. What's next in trade talks as Trump arrives in Scotland? And what he tells NTD about Harvard as Columbia agrees to a $200 million fine. Israeli forces strike more targets in the Gaza Strip after talks for a ceasefire come to an end. Now the U.S. and Israel are considering other options to free the hostages. Jason Perry with the latest. Thailand has declared martial law in areas near its border with Cambodia. This as tens of thousands of civilians are displaced due to an ongoing border dispute. Sam Wong brings us the latest in the conflict. Deportation flights are starting from the Florida detention facility known as Alligator Alcatraz. What Governor Ron Desantis says about the effort and the goals of the operation. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are gearing up for the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats say they're planning to fight fire with fire as they aim to redraw district maps in blue states. Luis Martinez reports from Capitol Hill.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin Hogan, in for Tiffany Meyer. President Trump in Scotland today for a 5-day visit that includes meeting with UK leaders and stops at his golf resorts. He's working to strike a trade deal with the EU, while also telling NTD that he'll stop all funding for Harvard University. NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotsu has more.
Meeting with the Prime Minister tonight. We're going to be talking about the trade deal that we made and maybe even improve it.
President Trump touched down in Scotland today, where he'll be for the next 5 days. The president told reporters that he plans to fine-tune the trade agreement that he made with Starmer on the sidelines of the G7 summit.
I think it's more of a celebration than a workout. It's a great deal for both. And we're going to have a meeting on other things other than the deal. The deal is concluded.
Trump is also set to meet with the EU president in what he calls likely the biggest meeting of all. And on the EU, the president today sounding hopeful about a trade deal.
European Union, I think we have a good 50-50 chance. That's a lot, but the sticking points are having to do with maybe 20 different things.
This morning, on his way out of the White House, the president also touted his tariff strategy and recent deal with Japan. He even floated giving some of the money that's coming back in to Americans.
We're thinking about a rebate because we have so much money coming in from tariffs that a little rebate for people of a certain income level might be very nice.
Meanwhile, as the administration faces Harvard in court, President Trump told NTD this morning that Harvard wants to settle. This after Columbia University agrees to pay $200 million in fines after failing to curb anti-Semitism on campus.
What is your message to Harvard now that Columbia has agreed to pay $200 million?
Harvard wants to settle, but I think Columbia handled it better. But ultimately, we win that case. And the bottom line is we're not going to give any more money to Harvard.
Now in Scotland, the president's expected to host British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Scottish First Minister John Swinney, while also visiting his golf resorts in Turnberry and Aberdeen. Reporting from the White House, Mariotsu, NTD News.
And during his visit to Scotland, President Trump is also expected to open up a new golf course to commemorate his mother. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us.
It is in Britain's national interest to have a strong relationship with the United States. So says British Chancellor Rachel Reeves.
As a result of both that long-term special relationship, but actually more importantly, the work that our Prime Minister Keir Starmer has done in building that relation with President Trump has meant that we were the first country in the world to secure a trade deal.
She said Scotland in particular benefits from the trade deal in sectors ranging from Scotch whisky to defence.
It means lower tariffs than other countries have on steel, on car exports, and also on defence and aerospace, which is absolutely crucial for businesses like Rolls-Royce, who have substantial investment here in Scotland.
The US steel tariffs on the UK are still in place despite the trade deal. Since being elected last year, Starmer has prioritized good relations with Trump, stressing the importance of Britain's defense and security alliance with the US, and being careful to avoid openly criticizing Trump's tariff policies. Trump is also expected to visit both of his golf clubs in Scotland. And as part of the visit, he will open a second 18-hole course on the Aberdeen property, named after his Scottish mother, Mary Ann MacLeod. Scotland's First Minister, John Swinney, welcomed the investment by the Trump organisation.
Scotland is a country that must be open for business. We must be able to attract investment to support economic growth and economic opportunities in Scotland.
While Swinney is not a golfer, he will meet Trump and says he's sure Trump will enjoy playing golf in Scotland. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
In the Middle East, Israeli forces continue to launch airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, just a day after ceasefire talks with Hamas fell apart. Israel and the U.S. say they'll now consider alternative options to free the hostages still held in the territory. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Residents in the Gaza Strip reacted to a reported Israeli airstrike that hit a building sheltering displaced residents, and emergency crews responded to the scene to try to save the injured. This comes just a day after the U.S. and Israel ended talks with Hamas for a ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip, saying Hamas was the obstacle to reaching an agreement. On Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted this on X. Together with our U.S. allies, we are now considering alternative options to bring our hostages home, end Hamas's terror rule, and secure lasting peace for Israel and our region. But before President Trump spoke to reporters on Friday, neither country had provided any details of what those alternative options could be.
Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die.
Trump then implied that Hamas is using the hostages for protection.
We got a lot of hostages out. We took them out in numbers that nobody believed, a lot of them. And I said, when you get down to 10 or 20, I don't think Hamas is going to make a deal because that means they have no protection.
And as for what those alternative options could be,
I think what's going to happen is they're going to be hunted down.
He also commented on French President Emmanuel Macron's plans for France to recognize the Palestinian territories as a state. And Trump said it wouldn't change anything, as multiple European countries already recognize Palestine as a state. Some residents in Israel shared their thoughts on it.
I think that is a real slap in the face to Israel and the victims of October 7th. I think it's easy to put the blame on Israel and say, oh, we reward this act of terrorism with a Palestinian state.
I think it's a good thing. I think that every step that brings us closer to a state solution is welcome and can move us forward.
Meanwhile, a colonel in the Israeli army said there are about 800 truckloads of humanitarian aid sitting inside the Gaza Strip, waiting to be delivered by the United Nations. However, the United Nations has said they aren't able to deliver the aid because of Israeli access restrictions. But in a new development, the UN has agreed to open dialogue with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, to determine a way to help deliver aid to the people in the Gaza Strip. The GHF responded to the UN saying, quote, "We are ready to get started as soon as you say the word." Jason Perry, NTD News.
Turning now to Southeast Asia, Thailand has declared martial law in areas near its border with Cambodia. So far, a total of 16 people have reportedly been killed as conflicts over a border dispute enter a second day. NTD's Sam Wong has the details.
Thailand and Cambodia exchanged heavy artillery fire for a second day on Friday. More than a dozen people have been killed and tens of thousands displaced in the escalating border battle. Footage shows vehicles with diplomatic plates passing through the Thai-Cambodia border, possibly carrying embassy officials back home after Thailand recalled its ambassador to the neighboring country. Far from the epicenter of the conflict, over 200 evacuees from the border region were relocated to a temporary shelter. A mother of a single daughter witnessed the unfolding of the crisis. The sound of explosions hasn't stopped, she said. They're falling constantly. All you can hear is the sound of explosions.
No.
Tensions between Thailand and Cambodia have been escalating since May. It began with the killing of a Cambodian soldier in a brief exchange of gunfire, which later spiraled into armed clashes. The State Department on Thursday called on both sides to drop their weapons.
We're also gravely concerned by the escalating violence along the Thailand-Cambodia border and deeply saddened by reports of harm to civilians. The United States urges an immediate cessation of hostilities, protection of civilians, and a peaceful resolution of the conflict.
Thailand has rejected ceasefire calls from third countries, as both sides blame each other for starting the conflict.
This is a confrontation between the two countries. Our doors are still open, but first of all, before anything, the cessation of violence, the Cambodian side must stop.
The U.S. classifies Thailand as a major non-NATO ally and has been providing support to its weapons programs for decades. With a total of 360,000 active duty troops, Thailand's armed forces are 3 times as large as Cambodia's. Cambodia, meanwhile, has a relatively younger military, which was established from the merger of its former communist forces and 2 resistance armies. The nation also receives funding from China to expand a naval base, prompting fear that the location could be used as an outpost for the Chinese Navy. Sam Wang, NTD News.
Deportation flights have started from Alligator, Alcatraz. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says they began a few days ago and are increasing. Also, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says drones are becoming a growing national security threat. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
So I'm pleased to report that those flights out of Alligator, Alcatraz by DHS have begun.
Governor Ron DeSantis says there's been a number of flights removing illegal immigrants over the past few days, and the number is increasing.
This airport is able to accept commercial-sized aircraft and conduct both day and nighttime operations. This provides an ability to enhance the mission to increase the number and frequency of deportations.
Alligator Alcatraz was built in 8 days and has over 200 security cameras, 28,000 feet of barbed wire, and 400 security staff. On top of that, the surrounding habitat hosts alligators, pythons, and other dangerous wildlife. DeSantis says the longer-term vision is to have immigration judges on site.
You can move forward with the processing very quickly and increase the numbers, and the flow would be there'd be a high turnover rate here because you'd be constantly doing that.
DeSantis says the state is working closely with the Department of Justice to make it happen.
We have not yet had any approval for anybody to be able to come down here and do that, but we do anticipate that happening very soon.
And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says that drones are being used more and more by enemies to smuggle drugs, target American infrastructure, as well as spy on U.S. defense assets. Noem says we're in the middle of a weapons technology revolution, and our enemies know it. As Secretary of Homeland Security, I'm committed to giving our frontline teams the tools they need to protect this country now and for generations to come. Noem says she visited the Customs and Border Patrol's Unmanned Technology Operations Center to, quote, discuss how we're using cutting-edge drone technology to stay ahead of evolving threats. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Republicans and Democrats are already gearing up for the 2026 midterm elections. Candidates have begun receiving endorsements, and both parties are adjusting their strategies to keep or regain control in Congress. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more on the story.
Less than a month after Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina announced that he is not running for re-election, President Trump thrusted Republican National Committee Chair Mike Whatley into contention. On a post on social media, Trump said Whatley was great at the RNC, where in the presidential election, Republicans won every swing state, the popular vote, and the Electoral College. Trump then said that he had a mission for his friends in North Carolina, and that is to get Michael Whatley to run for the U.S. Senate. On another social media post, President Trump endorsed Ashley Moody, the Florida senator that was appointed by Governor DeSantis to replace Marco Rubio. President Trump praised Moody, saying, Ashley is working tirelessly to grow our economy, cut taxes and regulations, promote Made in the USA, champion American energy dominance, and help secure our already secure southern border. On the House side, Republicans are hoping to win 5 seats in the state of Texas after Governor Abbott asked the state legislature to review districting in the Lone Star State.
So since the last time that we did redistricting, the law has changed. And under the law that changed in a lawsuit that was filed by Democrats, and the decision came out last year, it says that coalition districts are no longer required. And so we want to make sure that we have maps that don't impose coalition districts.
Coalition districts are districts drawn in a way that 2 or more minorities combined can form a majority. Democrats have vowed to redraw districts in blue states like California in retaliation.
Governor Gavin Newsom in California has talked about a redistricting in his state. I think it's time that we match fire with fire.
Democrats are also considering new strategies after losing the Senate, the White House, and failing to flip the House in the 2024 elections.
And so when you're always communicating, not just to cable news, but to local news, to podcasters, to influencers, always on means you're always honest. And we have the values on our side, and now we just have to be in more places, more spaces, and that's why we're going to win the midterms in just under 18 months.
Republicans currently have a 53-seat majority in the Senate, which they're likely to keep, and a 5-seat majority in the House. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
In education, adult literacy, English language instruction, and other programs are getting federal funding again. The Education Department said today it's releasing billions of dollars in grants. President Donald Trump's administration had withheld more than $6 billion in funding on July 1st. The pause was part of a review to ensure spending aligned with the White House's priorities. The funding freeze had been challenged by several lawsuits. Last week, the Education Department said it would release $1.3 billion of the money for after-school and summer programs. The Education Department said Friday the Office of Management and Budget had completed its review. The department will begin sending the money to states next week. Coming up, high temperatures continue to grip New York City, with the heat index soaring into the triple digits. Officials are sharing how New Yorkers can stay cool and safe. 50 million gallons of Mexican sewage in U.S. waters daily. Daniel Monahan has more on a new agreement that aims to put an end to the environmental crisis. A first-of-its-kind California ammunition law gets shot down by a federal appeals court on Thursday. What one judge says about its impact on the Second Amendment. And San Francisco passes a law to limit RV parking. The goal is to address the homelessness crisis and the hundreds of families living in vehicles. David Lamb reports after the break. Welcome back. Extreme heat continues to push New York City to its limits, with the heat index soaring into triple digits in some areas. Severe storms could also be on the way, bringing strong winds and heavy rain. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
A heat advisory remains in effect for New York City through Friday evening. Temperatures could feel as high as 105 degrees due to a combination of heat and humidity. The National Weather Service says the heat index may reach between 100 and 105 degrees. New York City Mayor Eric Adams shared how to stay cool.
Luckily, New Yorkers know how to be cool. We are the coolest city in the world, after all. So, for Friday, you should drink water, stay in AC, and our cooling centers will be open. They'll definitely be the coolest place to start your weekend. Stay safe, NYC.
Cooling centers are open throughout the city with extended hours at pools and spray showers. The National Weather Service issued an air quality alert for New York City, Long Island, Westchester, and Rockland counties through 11 p.m. Friday. With temperatures expected to exceed 100 degrees, people are advised to limit outdoor activities to reduce health risks. Severe thunderstorms with strong winds, hail, and lightning are possible from 4 to 9 p.m. Officials warn of potential flooding and advise moving to higher ground during heavy rain. The storms will bring a cold front, cooling the city for the weekend. Temperatures should stay in the mid-80s Saturday and Sunday. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The U.S. and Mexico have reached a landmark agreement to tackle a decades-old environmental crisis. the flow of Mexican sewage into U.S. waters. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports.
The U.S. and Mexico have reached an agreement to stop the daily discharge of up to 50 million gallons of sewage-contaminated water from the Tijuana River into the Pacific Ocean near San Diego. For years, the beach in Imperial Beach, a San Diego suburb, has been closed due to contamination, with keep out of water signs becoming a fixture. The pollution has hurt both tourism and public health. On Wednesday, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Mexico's Environment Minister Alicia Bárcena signed a Memorandum of Understanding in Mexico City. Under the deal, Mexico will fast-track more than $90 million in upgrades to the Tijuana sewage system. In return, the U.S. will release funds to finish expanding a sewage treatment plant located on the U.S. side of the border. That plant treats wastewater piped in from Mexico. The expansion is expected to be completed by the end of August. Zeldin called the agreement a huge win for millions of Americans and Mexicans.
I smelled what a lot of residents in the community live through and have to deal with. I saw the degradation of the Tijuana River Valley. I heard about the beaches that were closed. I met with the Navy SEALs who have had their training impacted.
And while the New Deal targets water contamination, a recent study warns the danger may also be in the air, as toxic particles from the Tijuana River are now believed to travel miles inland, raising fresh health concerns. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A first-of-its-kind California ammunition law was shot down by a federal appeals court on Thursday. The majority of a 3-judge panel said it violates the Second Amendment. NTD's Arlene Richards has details.
The Ninth Circuit upholds a block on California's background checks for ammunition buyers. A 2-to-1 majority of a 3-judge panel has ruled California can't require background checks for the purchase of ammunition. The court said the first-of-its-kind law is unconstitutional and that it violates the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Circuit Judge Sandra Ikuda said the law was inconsistent with traditional firearm regulation that has been approved by the Supreme Court, and that it meaningfully constrains the right to keep and bear arms. Voters passed the law in 2016, and it took effect in 2019. California Governor Gavin Newsom said the ruling was a slap in the face to efforts by California officials to enact firearm restrictions to curb gun violence. Many states, including California, require people to pass a background check before they can buy a gun. California went a step further by applying the check to the purchase of ammunition, such as bullets, which could cost $1 or $19 depending on eligibility each time a person buys the bullets or other ammo. The ruling confirms Federal District Judge Roger Benitez's permanent injunction, which had blocked the state from enforcing the law. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
RVs will soon have parking limits in San Francisco. Homeless people have been living in the vehicles, but the city is attempting to provide a solution. One recovery advocate spoke to NTD's David Lamb about the new rule.
The owners of hundreds of recreational vehicles have a choice to make after San Francisco supervisors made it illegal to park RVs for more than 2 hours. Passed this week, the city's plan is to set aside $13 million for 2 years to help more than 400 people living in RVs. It's offering shelter, transitional and permanent housing, and an offer to buy the vehicles and relocate them to a safe parking site that the city will help manage.
San Francisco's literally bent over backwards to try to accommodate the people that live in these RVs.
Tom Wolf, who was formerly homeless, says because of the lack of water or electrical connections, RV residents dump their raw sewage into storm drains or into Lake Merced where people fish.
Those are way more than reasonable requests for these folks. And so I think after offering all of that as kind of like a trade-off, I think it's more than fair to put a 2-hour parking for those RVs across the city.
Some are being used for drug dealing as well. But there are also many families, including immigrant families, living in the RVs. Some activist groups, such as the Coalition on Homelessness, are against the plan, fearing that it will increase homelessness, specifically among families, seniors, and those with disabilities. 2 out of 11 supervisors voted against the ordinance. For the RVs that still remain, they may have to move every 2 hours, and Wolf says they may possibly migrate to neighboring cities or counties. On a national level, President Trump's new executive order targets open drug use and urban loitering. Wolf, who is 7 years clean and sober and a recovery advocate, thinks drug policies from the last 10 years resulted in drug crises happening in cities such as San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland.
I really appreciate President Trump basically kind of sticking his neck out there on this one. His executive order was supported by a lot of advocates like myself that advocate for recovery. Many of us ourselves have experienced homelessness or drug addiction.
San Francisco's new law will take effect this fall and will not accommodate new RVs that come into the city. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Just ahead, the U.S. warns that China is actively supporting Russia's war effort. Arian Pastar has more on the message the U.S. had for China at the United Nations. Russia has sentenced a spiritual believer to 4 years in prison via a highly questionable law. Is this an extension of the Chinese regime's persecution of a faith group beyond its borders? A leading global human rights advocate joins us to discuss. And lawmakers subpoena the CEOs of two of America's biggest financial institutions over their roles in the IPO of Chinese battery giant CATL. Melina Wisecup reports in a moment. It's good to have you back with us. The U.S. warns that China is actively supporting Russia's war effort. The U.S. ambassador to the UN called out Beijing at today's meeting of the UN Security Council. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the Ukraine update.
If China is sincere in calling for peace, it should stop fueling Russia's aggression.
U.S. and Chinese officials confront each other on Ukraine at the United Nations on Friday. Reuters reports that Chinese-made engines are being used for Russian drones. They're being shipped under the label of industrial refrigeration units to avoid detection amid Western sanctions.
Of Chinese-produced components in the drones, weapons, and vehicles that Russia uses against Ukraine.
The Chinese ambassador responded, claiming Beijing controls the exports of so-called dual-use goods, such as engines. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russian glide bombs hit a hospital in Kharkiv on Friday. Ukrainian officials say the attack left at least 14 wounded. It's the second straight day the city was struck with a powerful glide bomb. An employee at the hospital condemns the attack by Russian forces.
Tuberculosis patients are being treated here. There is nothing military here. Only a cemetery and a field are near the hospital. What are they targeting this area?
Also on Friday, the Russian Navy continues a major military drill using live artillery fire and missile launches. The exercises are being held across different parts of the globe, including the Pacific Ocean in Asia and the Baltic Sea in Europe. The drill is scheduled to last until Sunday. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, protests continue in different cities across the country. Earlier this week, President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a bill into law taking away power from two important anti-corruption agencies. This came after officials from those two agencies were arrested over alleged Russian influence.
We think that our anti-corruption, NABU, SAP, or other government agencies are important for our independence and for our victory.
After days of protests, Zelensky on Thursday submitted draft legislation to restore the independence of those two anti-corruption agencies. Protesters say they hope the draft legislation will become law. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Staying with Russia, but now onto the topic of religious freedom. A Moscow court has sentenced a member of a faith group to 4 years in prison. Natalia Minenkova is an adherent of the Falun Gong spiritual practice. She played a role in a local Falun Gong organization. But a controversial 2015 law in Russia has declared these organizations, quote, undesirable, and has led to what critics call politically motivated prosecutions. Minenkova had been detained since her arrest in May 2024. Falun Gong has been brutally persecuted in China for over 26 years. Let's unpack this. Joining me now is Rabbi Abraham Cooper, former chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He serves as the Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action for the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a leading global Jewish human rights organization. Welcome to the show, Rabbi Cooper. This practitioner, Falun Gong, was arrested 2 weeks before CCP leader Xi Jinping visited Russia last year. We've seen similar things take place in countries like Malaysia and Serbia. How concerning is it that nations may be persecuting spiritual groups to align themselves with the CCP?
I think this is not surprising, inevitable, and very difficult to combat. I think in the case, though, of Russia, because, as you know, its predecessor, the Soviet Union, was officially an atheistic country, as the Communist Chinese laws also dictate. And I think even though things are different today under Vladimir Putin, and there are churches and mosques and synagogues that are functioning, nonetheless, when you have these kinds of leaders, they worry about the presence of believers in their societies who don't fit, let's say, the basic mold of the Russian Orthodox Church, for example, which works closely with the regime. And here you have, at least in one case, someone who's been put into prison, not for anything she said, but for meditating. But on a deeper level, whether it's President Xi or other authoritarian leaders, these are leaders who turn out to spend a lot of time worrying about God, worrying about faith, worrying about spiritual freedom. Because if you exercise your autonomy in a system where you're supposed to be a follower, you're deemed a threat to that system. But clearly in this case, I think Russia was trying to simply reward China for its support in its war against the Ukraine and in the international community.
I understand what you're saying, Rabbi Cooper. Thank you for explaining it. The State Department has condemned Russia for its repression of Falun Gong adherents. What steps need to be taken to hold Russia accountable for this?
It's quite difficult to go just beyond this element, especially because Russia is at war right now. Vladimir Putin is basically doing whatever he wants to do when it comes to attacking the Ukrainian homeland, their people, and even in some cases, their churches and other spiritual religious locations. So to say that shaming someone like that in the international court of public opinion doesn't do as much. I think the real issue would be increasing sanctions on those countries where it's going to hurt. The only thing they really care about would be in their pocketbook. For that to happen, you need not only the U.S. State Department and the president, but you also need aggressive congressional involvement. It's not simple. But the fact that this arrest is now known about, that this woman is not just a number in a cell somewhere, perhaps in Siberia, but actually someone you add to the list of activists, call them human rights activists, who we have to be concerned about and have to try our best to help. And also to understand that the Chinese approach, they've now destroyed many Christian churches. There are apparently discussions or efforts to control what it is that preachers are going to say at services on a Sunday. It's a very long list of intervention to try to crush religion and crush the faithful. And we have to look very carefully at places like Vietnam, for example, or other countries as they come more and more under the sphere of influence and control of Beijing.
Let's expand on this. Congressman Chris Smith says Russia is doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. He calls it a marriage of convenience and says Russia will, in time, find it to be an unhappy one. What's your perspective on this?
Well, it's really two different questions. Yeah, I think that both Xi and Putin see themselves as top world leaders. With Xi having a lot more, obviously, economic clout and geopolitical clout, China is flexing its muscles in so many ways and promoting its own system around the world. I think for Vladimir Putin, he's more harping on the, if you will, the good old days of the Soviet Union, of being the number one or two power in the world. They're far from being in that spot right now. But when you combine these two nations with their leaders showing utter disdain and worse for people of faith, for those institutions, it's deeply troubling, and hopefully will go on, certainly to the United States. It should be elevated in terms of our international diplomacy and interaction with not only those two capitals, but all of the countries around the world. I know that USURF looks at 28 nations around the world, and unfortunately what Beijing and Moscow do does have influence, rippling influence, and in this case a very negative one and disconcerting one all over the world.
And meanwhile, Rabbi Cooper, the Chinese Communist Party has exported its persecution of Falun Gong around the world, in some cases exploiting the media and legal system. And Americans are being impacted by this. What would you say has led the Chinese regime to be so brazen in its attempts to target people of faith around the world?
Well, I remember during COVID, the Chinese students at University of Southern California, I'm here based in LA, that terrible fire that took place where many people perished because they were stuck in an apartment house. And I noticed that night when I went to their outdoor memorial for the people who had perished, that almost every Chinese student and those who participated wore full face masks. They covered their faces because they were concerned that the authorities in Beijing would be able to identify them and their families in China. So when you think about, here you are standing in the in the freest country in the world, and you're worried about detection by a nefarious regime thousands of miles away. You have this marriage of high-tech advances with a very backward and very worrisome anti-religious policy and mindset of a powerful country, and if you will, use an influencer around the world. And whether it's in Tokyo, where I met with police authorities there, or we know right here in the United States, you have a presence of Chinese police in many democracies around the world. And I think what has to happen is not interested in any way to be against the people of China, but I think it's about time that all Americans, whether they're Democrat or Republican, whether they're of faith or not yet believers, we have to take these threats quite seriously, or we're going to wake up one morning and find that our own personal freedoms have been curbed due to the aggressive nature of the regime in Beijing.
All of that is so important to be aware of. In closing, how important would you say it is for people to advocate for and to protect the freedom of belief around the world?
I think this is really the greatest struggle of all. I was recently in Syria. I'm involved in trying to help with moving peace among many societies. We're all interconnected when it comes to people of faith. I think what we all need to do is look at human rights through the lens of religious freedom. It's a good litmus test to know where the society you live in, where it's at in terms of human dignity, and what might yet take place in the future. So we have to go outside our comfort zone, not only to look around the pews or whether we pray on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but to have a broader understanding and commitment, certainly in America and beyond, that we have to stand up for religious freedom and the protection of religious minorities, whomever they may be. If we fail to do that, we ourselves could find ourselves under scrutiny or under targets, and wonder someday, how did all this happen? So we, I think, also have to encourage our elected officials and to make it clear we're not lobbying for a particular religious group. We need to lobby to make sure that freedom of religion and freedom from religion protected in democracies. It's a core value. And when people feel uncomfortable, worried about going to a synagogue on a Friday night because of hate crimes, etc., that at the end of the day will impact the strength of our democratic institutions and our values and create real trouble for our children and grandchildren. So we need to make sure that we ourselves adopt that kind of mindset, and we have to make sure that this issue in Washington is not weaponized by the left or the right. This should be a fundamental issue that all Americans need to come together on, both domestically, but also globally.
Rabbi Abraham Cooper, thank you for sharing your message with us.
Thank you for having me. All the best.
In other news, two of America's biggest financial institutions are under scrutiny for their roles in the initial public offering of Chinese battery giant CATL. Lawmakers subpoenaed the bank CEOs, saying they've been stonewalled when trying to get answers. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more.
CEOs of JP Morgan and Bank of America are under scrutiny for their role backing a Chinese military tech giant. The institutions worked on the listing of Contemporary Imperex Technology, or CATL, a leading battery manufacturer which supplies to EV makers like Tesla. The House Select Committee on the CCP said this company directly poses U.S. investor and national security risks because it's a sector explicitly targeted by China's state-driven military-civil fusion policy. The Department of Defense added cattle to its list of Chinese military companies operating in the United States. Lawmakers previously urged JP Morgan and Bank of America to pull out of their roles in underwriting it and ask the CEOs questions about their involvement, only to be stonewalled, according to Chairman John Molinar. The chairman wrote, "Wall Street shouldn't be underwriting Chinese military companies, and the American people deserve transparency." Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Responding to the subpoenas, a Bank of America spokesperson said they have had constructive engagement with the committee and will continue to engage. JP Morgan declined to comment, but in May defended their involvement with CATL, saying JP Morgan did a lot of due diligence around the issues raised. The Trump administration signing several trade deals with Asian countries this week. Does this pull them away from the Chinese Communist Party and closer to the U.S.? Hear from the former U.S. Secretary of Commerce under the first Trump administration, Wilbur Ross. He'll be on NTD's Capitol Report tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And stay with us. In sports memorabilia, Caitlin Clark may be sidelined right now, but interest in her sports cards has hit an all-time high. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. Hi again, and now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, there is plenty going on right now, but let's start in college basketball as Kansas head coach Bill Self was hospitalized yesterday. What's the latest on his condition?
Yeah, the school said he went to the hospital after experiencing some, quote, concerning symptoms. Now, he ended up having a couple of stents inserted. It is expected to make a full recovery. They say he'll be released from the hospital soon. Now, 2 years ago, if you remember, Bill Self missed both the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament with what was called chest tightness and balance concerns. He underwent a heart catheterization and had a couple of stents inserted to treat blocked arteries. No word on whether this is related to that. Of course, Self, one of the best in the business. He's won 2 national titles at KU and 4 Final Fours. At one point, led the Jayhawks to 14 straight conference titles. He's already a member of the Hall of Fame. They should have another good team this season, so we certainly wish Bill Self a speedy recovery.
Yes, definitely. Right, so let's shift gears to tennis. 45-year-old Venus Williams lost last night. That was just 2 days after becoming the second oldest woman to win a tour-level singles match. Is she planning to continue playing?
Yeah, it looks like it. She's already confirmed to be going to the Cincinnati Open in August. That's already been confirmed, and then she's looking to get a wild card entry into the U.S. Open. later next month. I would think being a former two-time champion there, she would be a shoo-in for that. But she had a nice run this tournament here at the DC Open. Beat 35th ranked Peyton Stearns on Tuesday night. Last night her run came to an end, losing to 24th ranked Magdalena Frick. Both players are approximately half her age too, and these were her first matches in more than a year. She had been out since March of 2024 after having surgery to remove uterine fibroids. She's already a legend in the game here. Won 7 major titles overall. None's actually since 2008. As late as 2017, she at least made a finals of a Grand Slam tournament, so it's a treat for the fans to see her still.
Wow. All right, looking at baseball news, Arizona traded all-star first baseman Josh Naylor to Seattle last night for a pair of prospects. What is it about this trade that surprised you?
You know, what about this trade is Arizona is essentially signaling they're probably going to be sellers at the trade deadline here, which is next week. They traded an all-star first baseman for a couple of minor league prospects who are probably not going to play for them this year. Now, meanwhile, the Diamondbacks just 5 games out of the wild card race with about 60 games to go. So I'm a little surprised they're going this route. At the same time, it's kind of understandable, I guess. They're one of these in-between clubs, along with Kansas City and Minnesota, who are they're not in last place, but not in first place either. And if you hang on to an all-star player who will be a free agent this offseason, like Naylor, you risk losing him for nothing, but you help your playoff chances. If you trade him now, you get something in return, but obviously your chances of making the playoffs are much worse. Now, this could also signal that all-star third baseman Eugenio Suarez could be available as well. He would probably be the top bat available. He's got 36 home runs and a leading 86 RBIs, so stay tuned on what happens with Suarez.
Hey, Dave, it's America's pastime for a reason, but all right, moving on to sports memorabilia news. A signed Caitlin Clark rookie card has just sold for a record amount at an auction. How much did this go for?
Yeah, $660,000. That's nearly double the previous record, which is actually another Caitlin Clark rookie card here. Now, this is right here. This is the Platinum Rookie Logo Woman patch there in the upper right corner. Autograph card. It's ungraded, but it's sealed and encased by Panini. As you can see on the bottom right corner when it comes back around, actually, it says 1 of 1. This is a one-of-a-kind card here. And not only did Clark autograph it, she put on the bottom there it's backwards now, but 769 points and counting. That is the number of points she scored there as a rookie. There it is right there. So one-of-a-kind card here, $660,000. A lot more than I'd probably spend on a card, Kevin. But I bet in 5 or 10 years, this thing will be worth millions. So.
Hey, that is really awesome. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Kevin.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Hogan. Good night.